Yo, when you brought that shit up, I still don't know. I don't know how the hell she know Jeezy and all that shit. I don't know what's going on. Like, what?
Yeah, I went to public school.
I can tell. Ooh, because that was an old Jeezy song. That was before Uber. That was a different world.
Yeah, I forgot, since we were talking about Akon so much, I went back and listened to, like, Ghetto, like, he had that, in the ghetto.
Kyrie, if you could, like, stay between the
Oh.
they would be, like, covered.
And then I'll do this
Get an
thing.
angle. Hold up.
Yeah, I'm going to do this thing so, like, it's right in my face with it. Is that cool? Is that cool?
Yeah.
Perfect. And then you can still hear me?
Yes, I can.
Ow! Let's do it.
Alright, I'm good.
All right.
Rolling.
I'm also rolling.
Are we ready to roll?
Of course not, but let's do it.
Are we ready to roll?
Sure.
Let's do it. All right. Welcome to the Beyond Bars podcast. I am Catherine Gongaware.
I am Kyrie the Comic.
Today we have as a guest
Nicole Miner.
Nicole Miner and the Beyond Bars podcast.
We love her.
The Beyond Bars podcast, we're getting better at this, but
Yeah.
not quite all the way there. The Beyond Bars podcast has been created to highlight stories of those who have experience, exposure to, have been through the criminal justice system.
And here, we love to know everyone's narrative and spread it to people at home or on the train so that you can support them from afar, because we understand that a key to decriminalization is humanization. So wherever you at, we appreciate you for supporting our people.
Yay!
Yay!
We're getting better. Nicole Miner is our guest today. Nicole, welcome to the Beyond Bars podcast.
Thank you. Thank
we are
you.
so psyched to have you.
Same.
Nicole
Crowd
Miner
noise.
is, I can give a brief intro and then please add to it.
Okay.
Please add to it. Nicole Miner, as we know each other, is on the board of Prison Yoga Chicago, which I am as well, for those of you that have not tuned in thus far. She is our chair of the scholarship board and scholarship fund, where we provide funds to those that have practiced with us yoga in Cook County Jail and want to continue their yoga practice afterwards. So we have an entire fund donated from Yoga for Recovery to make all that happen, and Nicole is leading the charge. Kyrie also happens to be on the board, don't you?
Yes,
How
I
interesting
am.
is that. So she does all of that. In addition, leads a very fascinating life, and I think you can tell us about it a little bit.
Yeah, so thank you. Gosh, I have just, I think, an uncommon story in terms of how I grew up, where I came from, and how I even landed in Chicago, let alone be a part of Prison Yoga Chicago. So I was born in Germany, lived overseas. I'll make this short. Didn't speak English very well, though both my parents were American. I'm not quite sure how they worked that out, but
Did you
they
grow up
did.
speaking German?
I did for a small period of time, and then came to
That's the
that's for
extent
sure.
of it.
Oh, yeah, that's how we going? Yeah.
So
I
read
don't-
the rest of the show in German. I hope you can keep up. But no, yeah. Once I moved back to the United States, though, when I was still in elementary school, I got held back a grade. They're like, your English is terrible, so you need to repeat first grade. I was already in second grade for a couple weeks. So mind you, my German extends to like nap time, cookies, and so on and so forth. So, I can say a couple of things there. But either way, I've bounced around Germany, U.S., landed high school in Oklahoma, decided that was not the place that I felt most authentic. I am mixed race. My dad's white, my mom's black, and the reception of our family looked different every day, right? Yeah, exactly. So just it was unique, and I begged to move to multiple other places. My mom was like, I'm raising my child. I'm one of 4 girls. So my dad had lots of women keeping him straight. You're welcome, Dad.
Ladies as pimps too.
I
as
mean,
always
right? But when I was there, I decided that I wanted to go to college for free. So I ended up getting, I guess we could call it a scholarship to the United States Military Academy. Did the whole Army Academy thing in New York, and I always say that when I was there, you're a cadet, right, at first. So when I was there as a cadet, is when I first realized that I was a girl. And that's kind of weird to say, but really, because it came down to is my father raised all of us girls, and we could do and be anything, regardless of our gender. Yes. And then I get to West Point, and I'm like, hey, I want to go infantry. Well, at the time, women were not infantry, and I got laughed away from the group of infantry guys who I was asking questions so I could figure out what I need to do. I was like, oh my God, wait, this is a thing. And then So, did my Army career. I've got a couple of deployments, all that, and most lived all over. Have, I don't know what number move I'm on, but a lot. It's like 10 or something now. And so I've been all over the world, loved it. But what's so unique about it is, even though I'm a very dissenting person, I've always been an advocate. Even when I was a cadet at West Point, I am military police. And in the Army myself, I've been in for almost 20 years. And so it's like, how does someone become military police when you are not a fan of the police in some instances, right? So it's kind of weird. And I got into yoga because I actually got injured in the Army. Not a combat-related injury. That's a sensitive subject. If people believe that, it's not the case, right? So is this a result of our gear and being, at the time, a little bit smaller. So I got injured, and the only thing my physical therapist would let me do was yoga. And I grew up being physically active, moving. That's how I made friends. That's how I, found balance. And all I could do was yoga in this very, very nice yoga studio. She let me come and do private lessons for 15 minutes once every other day and gave me 15 minutes of movement. And that just changed the world for me. And so I got my certification so I could bring movement to wounded warriors. Worked with a lot of different populations. And then at the same time, the Army sent me to go get my degree in sports psychology. So I have a background in working with elite athletes. So while I'm broken, I was working with D1 athletes, Olympic athletes, helping them go from normal to super normal performance. So kind of a weird, ended up now I'm marketing and I live in Chicago. So there's a whole lot of steps in between, but just really weird. So yoga became a strong part of my life. Advocacy and being a voice became a strong part of my life. And I think just even being in the Army, that gave me an unexpected platform to really advocate for folks that don't always have a voice, especially when they look like me. So that's kind of the roundabout of how I got to Chicago.
Wow. Your life has been lit.
I've lived.
Yeah, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, Nicole, I know a little bit, right, of this story, but I've been pretty excited to unpack it a little bit because I'm, for those that are listening that don't know any of this, tell us a little bit about the transition and the complement maybe of the work with Prison Yoga Chicago. What brought you into our work?
Yeah, so part of me finding community every time I move, because again, I move every 1 to 2 years to the Army. In this case, I've been here for 4 years, so it's the longest place I've actually lived my whole life.
Shout out Chicago.
I know, right? So I even bought a house here. I'm staying.
Yeah.
So whenever I move, I try to find community through yoga studios and advocacy work, nonprofit work that folks do, and then also my sorority that I'm part of. And so I was stalking y'all on Instagram in a very non-threatening way.
Stalking non-threateningly.
And COVID happened, but that's when you all started the book club. And everybody was just so warm and welcome and said hey, yeah, come volunteer with us. And the book club was essentially we were reading the same book with those that were in CCJ. And we were able to dialogue with them via written communication. They would send us their answers to questions. We'd write responses, and we were all just reading this wonderful book together. And so that's how I ended up initially landing with Prison Yoga Chicago. And then once there was an opportunity to join the board, I remember Nikki, the previous president, called me. It's 10 o'clock one night and was like, "Hey, you should join the board." And I'm like, "I don't know what that means, but sure." And here I am. So I think I've been 2 years. Is this start of year 3? I can't remember.
Probably the start of year 3.
Right, because we came on together.
Wow.
When you came on as president, you were already part of the board. But
yes, Nikki was good at that, wasn't she? Because
Yeah.
she did the same thing with me. She was like, "It's your time,
Yeah.
and you will be president now."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Okay."
right?
That's
Right.
kind of false. I
She
like
didn't
that.
really give you a chance to say
She really
no.
did not.
And she does it in such a kind, gentle way that you
Yes.
don't actually know that you're being influenced, but
And she really does care. Nikki's the founder of Prison Yoga Chicago, by the way. I found it. Shout out to Nikki and her husband Tim.
She was using her yogi powers.
Yeah, she really was using that
Yeah.
sort of white witchery.
I'm so glad she did though.
She was.
Oh, Blair Witch Project.
Yeah,
Oh,
she was
sneeze
doing
out.
it. She was doing it. Well, awesome. I obviously have a couple questions. Kyrie, you got anything?
I have
cool?
a ton of
'Cause I know
questions
we're
because we settled. What do you like about Chicago that made you stay here 4 years versus, the amazing places like Oklahoma?
Yeah. I have lived some cool places, Colorado, Korea, went back to Germany, Poland, right? So I've lived some really amazing places. And what I love about Chicago is what I talked about is like community. The Army has been a tough place to be. And so after some challenges in the Army and just constantly trying to find my voice, when I came here, quite honestly, I was emotionally broken. And I started working with, right? Like,
Relatable.
just done. And so I started working with this life coach, and she's like, you've got to figure out, like, what's your most authentic version of yourself. And yeah, we did some great work, and part of it was community, because everywhere I went, I was like seeking people to be able to have a common goal with and keep like pursuing a better world. And that sounds so cliche, but that's really kind of what it's about. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been a black woman in the Army, right? This is like, there's some things that go along with that. And in Chicago, I live in a black neighborhood for the first time in my life. I have a black coffee shop. I have a black gym, right? Like, I get to be around amazing people that think and look like me, which I have never experienced ever. And I'm over 40. And the other part about it is my fiance. He's born and raised here in Chicago. His family's here.
Chicago.
Yep, shout out to Kevin W. I won't say his last name because he will not like that.
Won't be your last name in a minute.
Well,
The story for another podcast.
Right. I mean, I'm hyphenate. Look, I got 20 years of a career behind this last name, so.
That's how you coming?
That's how
Hey.
a lot of us are coming.
Yeah.
And women in pimps too. You ain't lying.
For now. Next career, I will fully transition, but for now. But yeah, so the community piece of it and just being able to like find a way to integrate into Chicago, Bronzeville specifically, and not have to be a soldier in every moment, I guess, right? Like that is, I get to be all parts of myself in Chicago. And I haven't got to do that because I'm always living near a military base, so there's not an active duty base here. So it's a completely different situation. I love it. And I'm not leaving. I'm saying that for my boss. Ma'am, I'm not leaving. I'm just kidding, ma'am. Just kidding.
He like living that civilian life, huh?
No. I mean, I wear my uniform every day. Ma'am, I wear my uniform. But yeah.
Chicago is lucky to have you, honestly, I can say, as the board. Nicole is, by the way, something that we do on the Beyond Bars podcast is we will send questions, especially since we're talking about pretty intense and sensitive stuff. We send questions to our guests ahead of time in terms of like, what might you want to explore? What do you not want to touch? And Nicole, in the way that she is, in the standard operating procedure, planning, alpha, female, that she is, sent back full responses to each one of these questions.
I mean, it's only 5 pages. Come on.
Just making her aware of
It's not 5 pages.
in advance. But no, I want to give you the opportunity to speak on some of this stuff. We'll obviously get to, your relationship with the criminal justice system specifically, but I mean, that's really like, it's irremovable, I would say, from law enforcement, right? Mostly because I think all law enforcement folds up into mass incarceration, right? And
absolutely.
post, new Jim Crow era. So I am curious, specifically about what you mentioned.
In
Your
the hot seat
experience
now. Bring it.
Yeah, let's do it. About your experiences, frankly, as a black woman in the military. Like, tell us a little bit about that and what your relationship to law enforcement feels like.
I never expected to be military police, quite honestly. And when you're a cadet at West Point, you get to rank order your preferences for like what type of position jobs you want to have, right? And so I already talked about how like I couldn't go infantry, which is when I went into the academy, I thought I was going to be a pilot or infantry. Women could be pilots, couldn't go infantry. And so what was the next closest thing to that? Because 9/11 happened my freshman year.
Damn!
Oh yeah. So I was in New York, not New York City, just outside of New York. 9/11 happened as I was walking to a class. So anyways, all that to say, I landed on military police, but I had already been exposed to a world through like my youth, but in particular in my future career field in the Army, of being a woman. So there were less than 20% women in my class, and there was, I think, about 4 or 5% black women in my class. So being exposed to walking in spaces
and class size of, sorry to interrupt you.
Each year it's about 1,000. So my class, I think
4
it's
to 5 black women in a class of 1,000.
Yeah, I'm looking at the numbers like, what?
Yeah, well,
That's super surprising.
4 to 5%.
Shit.
Yeah, so a little bit more. So there's like 30, 40 of us,
Okay,
right?
okay.
So
Still,
So
yeah.
yeah, super small, super small. But yeah, so I just know like walking into spaces and the comments that I got even from instructors who are now been in the Army usually for 5, 10. You have to have a master's to teach at the college level, so 10 years at least. They would say things like, "Oh, well, you're here because you took someone's slot."
Damn.
Well, whose someone is that? Oh, you mean a white male slot, right? Because you have to compete. You have to get a congressional nomination. You have to apply. So I was nominated by a member of Congress to go to West Point. I didn't just like show up and like first come first serve, right? I had to work to get in there. And so I was faced with
2001.
yeah, right.
Sounds like pretty familiar rhetoric.
I know, right? Not much has changed because I went back to teach in
Yeah.
13 and 16, and some of my cadets were still being told the same thing. And so it wasn't just the faculty; it's also your peers, right? They think that like someone else
Yeah.
earned a spot in your affirmative action move, and so you are there as a result of that affirmative action move, and not that you're competitive. And hopefully some of those folks, surprise, I'm still here and doing well.
Oh, that's the energy.
Oh,
You can't get rid of me.
Oh,
Oh,
man.
toot.
Oh
God,
man.
a few things we love more than being petty on this podcast.
Right.
Right now.
That was the run it up
I
name.
didn't
Yeah,
know I was
Petty.
part of Team Petty,
Petty
did
with
you?
cause. Petty with cause.
So yeah,
Oh,
so just trying to like move into spaces and finding a voice. So the way I did that is like if you don't have room for me at your table, then me and a couple other women we just created our own tables, right? And so we developed programs to educate people because the connection to the criminal justice system, even at the academy. So I looked it up last night just to remind myself is. There's a military justice system, right, that runs parallel to the federal system, and at the academy, cadets are held to a similar type system. Black cadets are prosecuted, not the word we use, but prosecuted at a 2 times more likely rate than our white counterparts, right?
I would
Black
almost
men
maybe
in
higher.
particular, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, and then even on active duty, it's like black soldiers make up only, this is like 2018, only like 20% of the Army, and they're like 35% of those who are brought before the criminal system and found guilty, right? And so those same type of things that you see in the United States, you're going to find in the Army, right? It's the same people, right?
Yeah, as above and so below. So it don't matter what
Right.
structure within America, if it's an institution, it's going to reflect some of American
And
values.
this is prosecuted for crimes like on the job, that kind of
Exactly.
Right?
So it could be anything. So I've had 2 soldiers go AWOL. One gets a benefit of the doubt. I was like, he's had a lot of stuff going on with his family. He was just under a lot of duress. Okay, we're just gonna counsel you. You're gonna do a little bit of like administrative punishment, which we can do in the Army. So that's like mowing the lawn or something like that, right? Yeah.
Oh, for AWOL?
Right.
Absent while on leave?
Yeah. Well, without leave.
Right, without
Yeah.
leave? Like,
Yep.
so bro just was gone and...
Gone, right? And then I have, black soldiers who are brought back in, if, depending on how they come back, but like they're, cuffed and then pretrial confinement, and there's a lot of other things that can be done, and it's not adjudicated equally. Surprise, right? So it's not adjudicated
one's
equally.
mowing the lawn and one's in jail.
Yeah, pretrial confinement, right? That's CCJ.
That's jail.
But
Yeah.
pre-trial confinement also sounds like you just said this person isn't found guilty, but he's locked up like he
That
is.
sounds like that's a whitewashing of jail.
Right.
I had to break that turn down in my head. I'm
Yeah,
like,
let's
is
remind
this nigga free or
everybody.
not?
Right, exactly.
Technically.
Yeah. And so
Making me hot.
I mean, I'm like, wow, why'd I wear a sweatshirt? Because I can feel like my
I
blood
know, we're all
like
getting a little-
boiling. And so yeah, my role that I felt for myself, even though I have gone through some harmful experiences, was like to continue to be the voice when other people couldn't be the voice for themselves, right? So I'm an officer. So if I go through an experience and I'm like, gosh, what would my junior enlisted soldiers go through? Because they have way less rank than I do, right? They have less ability to like stand on a platform. If I walk into a room and there's not someone that looks like me in there, I will purposely go sit at a table that I may not always supposed to be at by position, and I make them remove me. I went to a meeting once, and had a general look at me and said, "What the hell are you doing here?" I said, "I saw it on your calendar, sir, and I thought that I should just come in and see what was going on because I knew who all was going to be in the room." And he said, okay, you can stay this time. I was like, okay. I just kept showing up. I was going to make him tell me I could not be there versus asking permission to be there. Yeah. So,
You
yeah.
got that Mamba mentality. That's
Yeah.
cold right
No,
there.
no.
I like that.
Apologize later.
Yeah. Well, you said you was in the game for over 20 years. I think, like, can't nobody do nothing like that.
Kevin tells me the gang too. He's like, you got jumped in and everything.
Yeah. Yeah, then you was in the yeah, you know this, you know how this goes. So I for a person, like, the reason I like that energy so much is, like, even to this day, I get a lot of shit because I'm from the west side of Chicago, but I come on the north side and use the clubs and shit. So, you know, yeah. So people was like cracking jokes and shit and like, you know, what you doing up here? You a long way from the west side. It's like, I'll stab you in your neck. Don't fucking play with me. But I respect that energy because no one would be able to know how we feel in our head and in our heart while we're trying to trailblaze, right? So that's why I respect you and I commend you because I know that you had experiences going on where you couldn't even go talk to a motherfucker because there's probably somebody that told you don't need to be there in the first place.
Yeah.
Or you shouldn't be there. And so what do you tell someone who's experiencing something like me or what you went through when they're trying to trailblaze and they just got people that are just against them for whatever reason?
Yeah. So I have done two different things for myself. One is something that I guess a big sis of mine has shared with me, and then the other comes from my sports psychology background. So there's two things that I do. The first one is there's 3 questions that I ask. Does it have to be said? Does it have to be said now? Does it have to be said by me? Because I used to be the person that was like, yes, yes, and yes.
Structure and order.
Right? And I was always the one to say everything, regardless of whether they were prepared to receive. And that was like, wah, 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 at sometimes, right? Charlie Brown, right? And so I had to optimize my communication to get my message across. So those are the 3 questions I'd ask. And the other thing is when I had to go into those rooms and have those conversations, I came prepared. I know we hear a lot of Black women and men talk a lot about, well, I'm over-prepared. I wouldn't say that I felt it in that way. It wasn't just like the physical preparation, it was the mental preparation. So I actually write notes to myself. Like if you look at, this is why I have my iPad. Like if you look at my notebook, I didn't do it for quite the same for today, but I'll write cues for myself. Like, what's the main message that I want to get across? Because when I walk into some of these spaces and I raise my hand or whatever it is, and I'm like, hey, when you have that policy, it actually impacts people that look like me way more than everybody else. Like, someone's going to try to shut me down. So I write, what's my main point? And then I write things like, breathe. I apply yoga in every single space. I give myself a mantra. Like, I go through body scanning, trying to relate to, like, how do I feel best? How does my body feel when I'm trying to perform my best? And try to, like, replicate that. Before I walk through the threshold of a door, when I go into these spaces, I literally stop and I check in with myself. These are all things that we talk about in our class, right, when we teach together. And I make sure that I am best prepared mentally to be able to take on people that don't want me there. So that's what I do. And it works sometimes and sometimes it doesn't. And the times that it doesn't, I go back and maybe the job has definitely made me cry. Has made me, like, I'm a Cancer, right? My birthday's in July, so.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I know.
All the feelings.
It's very emotional,
So many
okay?
feelings.
So, like, I literally will have to go home and cry it out, and I'll put on a good show, and I'll take a shower, and then, all right, regroup tomorrow, because what I said earlier is, if not me, then who, in terms of, like, the advocacy work. And I really, truly believe that, especially when I was a kid, I had so many women in particular come to me and say, thank you for doing this. Thank you for saying this, because I don't think I could have done this without somebody else bringing it first, right? And so that's what keeps me going. But it's hard, y'all. There are days where I'm like, can y'all handle this today? Because Nicole needs to lay down.
That's a lot. You carry a lot. But, that just means you're pretty strong.
It's choice, though, right? And I'm choosing to continue to do that.
You are. But you're equipped. You do it well. I don't know. You got a lot of good stuff going on.
I want to run back one thing that you said, those 3 things that you said, like the 3 questions that you ask, I feel like they're critical, and frankly more white people should be asking them of themselves is, does it need to be said, right? Does it need to be said now, that should be said, and does it need to be said by me?
Yeah.
And I, like, so often I think it's a very, like, sort of yoga, like, mantra to repeat that to ourselves, because people that are used to taking up space, which, like, racially we can argue white people, but, like, people that are used to taking up space will continue to take up space. Not even because like people want to be bad, right? Not even because people want to be loud, but like it's just a habit.
Feels like they're right.
Yeah, an expectation of like, yes, I enter this space and like I belong here, so I'm gonna take it up. And then that requires, right, an adjustment of habit, but so does speaking up. So does if you're not someone, if you're passive, whatever, you know, racially, whatever. But if you're not so used to taking up space, like making sure that you do take it, but especially racially, white people need to take a step back and bring other people into the space because we've kept people out. We've kept people in jail. We've force-fed people, like, you know, Amarak, just shit. Like, we have created this system. So I obviously, like, you don't need my, you know, commend, but I do commend you for taking the space and making sure that you have it, because it's just not always given.
Yeah, and I will just add there, like, I commissioned, so I became an officer in 2005. And while a lot of growth has happened since then, like, I was fortunate to be under the leadership of some very important people who drug me along in some meaningful ways. So while I was always the person to be able to like use my voice, I didn't even always know where to place my voice, right? And so like my very first boss, Danielle Thomas, I mean, this man, he's retired from the Army now, did over 20 years. He was my first boss, and he was like, hey, I see what you're doing. I'm going to help you. And everywhere that I moved, he would call me and say, hey, here's what your next career move could be. Here's what I think it should be. And would get me into jobs and opportunities that I probably wouldn't have had, especially as a woman, and being like in different like infantry type units, the ones that again women were not a part of. And so it was yeah, I definitely had a voice, but it was those folks, like those true trailblazers, making way for me and others, and literally just saying like, hey, you're gonna show up here, you're gonna show up here. And sometimes they wouldn't give me instructions, and I would just show up and not know what I was supposed to be doing. But like really, they're the ones that like are making these moves happen. And because we all know the good old boy system exists. Can we just acknowledge that real quick?
I hate it so
We can
much.
say more.
And so they were helping us figure out how to maneuver around the good old boy system to where we don't have a team that's all white men, that we have a team that's mostly white men, a black woman, and maybe, you know, a Hispanic person or Asian person, right? They were helping to kind of build that diversity of thought and looks and all those other things into our organizations, our units, right? So yeah, I'm grateful for more than just Colonel Thomas, but in particular for him because he started it all.
That's real.
Good old boys, by the way, for white people listening, is coded language for the good old days, which is when white folks like were, you know, not, I would say, surrounded by these super predators as in black folks, like, and where we, you know, I mean, Trump has repeatedly referred to like the good old days in ways of like when a black person enters one of his protests, like in the good old days, like we used to drag this guy out and he's a criminal, and that's the criminalization of a human that is strictly race-based and like rolling off of slavery. So, good old boys.
And that's the hard part, though,
Not
right?
so
because
great.
the Army becomes a tool.
Yes.
In those instances. I'm sorry, like, you just made me really feel that conflict that I have all the time and everything, right? Like, I'm a soldier and I'm proud of being a soldier, but also, like, I don't want to be a tool to those folks who are, you know, manipulating what the good things that America could be in order to hold on to archaic policies, systems, right? And especially the criminal system. Like, yeah, it's very, very hard. And, you know, I talked about a little bit about being military police. I've actually had to run a jail in the U.S., and I had to run a jail in Iraq, right? We didn't call it jail there, but a detention facility.
When you say run it, you like a warden?
I was not a warden. My boss was the warden. So I provided the soldiers that worked in there and had to oversee that team. So I had 140 soldiers.
You had COs under you?
Yeah, we use different terms.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm trying to like draw the parallels, but yep. So,
wow.
And it was a conflict because part of my rub is like, you look at people every day on the street and you're like, could be good, could not be good, right? Deserves a chance, right? And who am I to say otherwise? And then next thing you know, I'm like, you know, getting buzzed in and into this facility. It was 7 years or less, so it was a regional facility. And there are folks who have made a mistake, and I know there are folks that are in there that made the same mistake as other folks that are not in there, like I talked about, right? Those numbers earlier. So that's just it's a constant conflict for me. And after George Floyd was killed and like everybody was having their awakening, it was probably like some of the hardest moments because one, I was just gotten here, so I hadn't built community yet, but two, because it just really reminded me why the times that I want to get out is because I don't want to be that tool, right? And so it's like, okay, I want to go do advocacy, I want to do more. Do I stay and keep fighting from inward, or do I get out? And I don't know the answer. I mean, I know I've been in for as long as I am. I have been so far, but like that's a battle.
I can't help but I'm so moved to tell you this. I don't think that the other side cares. Like, it doesn't look right or wrong, right? You're doing what you were sent to do, and that's all that is. And so, like, God don't want you to get so caught up on like the dogma of should I be on this side fighting a good fight or should I be on that side? Because as long as you're fighting a good fight, it doesn't really matter. We all need
but what
everybody.
Contribution, right? Like as a military police officer, what contribution am I making that is, because I can't break the system down, like
For
the
sure.
Army one or the one outside the Army, right? Federal, state, whatever. So like playing within the system also helps continue to build it up.
130%.
And that's the conflict. You know, I do appreciate what you said, but
No, I understand because I too am very like I'm hyper aware. I've left so many organizations because of similar feelings. Of feeling like I'm too much on one side when I'm really supposed to be on another side. And that's why I'm talking to you and me. Because when I'm listening to your story, I'm like, dog, do you understand the amount of people you impacted? The amount of people you saved that'll never be able to tell you thank you or they never did? Sometimes, and this is what I used to, I had a background in motivational speaking, and I always tell people, sometimes it's about planting the seeds for trees that you won't be around for the shade.
Amen.
You know what I mean? And so, like, somewhere, it's trees growing, you plant it, and you're not even going to be around for it. And that's why, in the grander scheme of things, I feel like it's so messed up for you to ever feel like that or ever question that. But that, you know, being a trailblazer is like that, dog.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and like, I mean, I think Nicole, even you speaking on it and being honest and transparent about the conflicted nature of like yourself as a human, what you do professionally, personally, like the whole nine is important and does make moves in and of itself because like none of us are purely good.
Yeah.
Like, right? Like even in yoga, like first limb of yoga being ahimsa, as in non-violence. I don't buy that. And when I lead teacher trainings too, like I break that down and it's just do less harm.
Right.
Like
That's what ahimsa
non-vi-
means?
Yeah, ahimsa
Ahimsa.
means non-violence. It means like non-harming, and it's the first limb of the first portion of the first limb of yoga. So we would argue as yoga teachers, like you're not even doing a handstand if you don't move through like basically a pretty perfect dynamic of like how clean are your relationships, how clean is your relationship with yourself, and the first limb of a dynamic that you can have with the world is non-harming. But like that's not realistic.
Right.
Nothing is non-harming. So, you know, I like to think of it at least as like do less harm, but we're all conflicted all the time and we're all causing harm all the time.
It's actually my favorite one out of them. Yeah.
That's your win.
It's absolutely my favorite. Which is so ironic.
I don't think I know we all do harm, right? Because everybody got a carbon footprint. It's a cow somewhere choking because you ate a steak. Whatever, right? Like, but like, I just think it's about the heart. Like, there's so many non-playable characters that just run around the world doing anything and going along with the flow. I really like people who are trailblazers, people who think for themselves because it's not easy. You know what I mean? Like, even for you, a trailblazer, you're so self-aware that you're aware of when you're hurting people, even while you're helping people. There are people who don't have those conversations at all. They just go to their Petco job and they come back home, they turn on Netflix, they never once think, who am I hurting? And so, like, you know, your empathy, right, is your weapon to be used on others or yourself, depending on, you know? Because think about it, like you said, you walked into the facility and you felt empathy for people in a space where it probably wasn't none. And, you know, all I need is one person to see me for me to at least, you know, hold on sometimes, you know?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, when you were a part of that detention center, right, military jail, like, what was it like day to day for you?
So I think like the two main experiences so when I was part of the regional facility in the United States, it was DoD, so soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines that were housed in there, right? So somebody who's part of Department of Defense, and being in that space was, honestly, like there's some days where I would move quickly through it, right? Being honest, right? Because it was like tension and discomfort that I wasn't wasn't in a space to experience, because I was also preparing my team to go to Afghanistan. So it's like, this is here, this is going to be here. I got to make sure we're ready so we stay alive when we go to Afghanistan. Then the other days when I was more aware, I would go in and I'd try to just look at people. It sounds really weird, but I try to like see them through their like the uniform they're in, and actually see them, not see someone who is confined. So that's kind of like the two ends of it. It was like, get in, check on my shoulders, check whatever I need to, sign off on things, right? Again, type A, so hit all those marks. And then other days I was like, all right, let me see you. Now I couldn't sit down and have true conversations with them, like, tell me about yourself, because that's not the role that I played. But it was also making sure that, hey, wait, why is this person not in his cell with everybody else? Like, why are they separated? And being able to like call out odd things. I would say though, because again, Black woman, right? And in that organization, I think I was the one other Black woman in my team of 142, and she was one of my subordinates. So I couldn't just like call it out. So I'd have to ask these questions like, oh, explain to me, why is this guy separated? Like, what's going on here? And make it seem like I didn't know, but I knew, right? And they'd be like, oh, ma'am, well, da-da-da. Oh, yeah, that doesn't sound right to me. Let's go ahead and put them back where they belong, right? Like, there's no need for you to have this person isolated in this capacity, right? So
I feel like a superpower of being a woman, by the way,
Oh,
is
man.
pretending to be as dumb as everyone thinks we are.
like,
Oh, y'all be doing it.
To get what we want.
all the
You
time.
gotta find an angle.
You have to like ask questions, but not with like a hard question mark. It's like the soft one. You have a little inflection of your voice right at the end, like, oh my god, like, why? Yeah.
Could you just help me understand?
Yeah, right? Like, I probably shouldn't, I would say this all the time, I probably should know this, but can you just help me? I'm trying to learn your job. Help me understand why this
You
and this
trick
is
them
happening.
into mansplaining
Oh.
so that they feel like they're actually doing
So
something?
then they reveal themselves, and I know what they're doing that they're not supposed to be doing. Because of course I know the policies and regulations, and I know which ones are harmful that we don't need to implement in that manner. Yeah.
Oh.
Damn, ladies is
Yeah.
pimps too. This is crazy right now, dog.
Watch out now.
It's that yogi magic, yo. I'm like,
steps ahead.
Yeah.
A couple steps. Yeah, I mean, Nicole, you're so many steps ahead.
I got
Go.
I got just so I was like, I was just wanted to keep a pulse on the streets and see like how people feeling, and I looked at this tweet that I can remember word for word. A young lady on the south side of Chicago, shout out to her, said, and I quote, "Before I serve this country, I serve crack." Why do you think that young lady on the south side might feel that way?
So,
That was 4 O's.
Yeah.
5 maybe?
look, the struggle is real right now. I mean, I'm going to try not to go too marketing, because again, I'm Army marketing now. I'm still a soldier. I market in the Army, which is another conflict, right? Like, I'm trying to help people join, knowing the things that they might go through. But we have a really hard time telling the Army story. And because there are narratives that are true in some capacity and maybe exaggerated in others, that going into the Army as a Black woman, that it's like going to be the worst experience of your life. And there are some really tough moments. I have definitely faced some tough moments. I've faced some tough moments as just a soldier, like being in Iraq with my team, and tell you what, race and gender do not end up mattering when you are roaming around on Baghdad trying to make sure you keep yourselves alive. And then there are times where, like, yes, I walk into a space and people don't see me, right? And I think that exists everywhere in the United States, and I think that there's a belief that exists more in the Army, and in some cases it absolutely happens. So it is really hard. Like culturally, can people really be themselves when they join the army? Like that's the question out there, right? Like why would I join the army if I can't be all of me? Because Gen Zers want to be authentically themselves, and maybe some millennials as well. We're a little bit different. And then the other part is
We're like just learning that we're allowed to be.
right. No, right. Like I saw something on Instagram that was like, we're the ones that are figuring this out and educating everybody else now at this point.
Yeah, we're trying to talk up and learn down.
Right. And just like I think like trust is the other big part. So I struggle with trust. The cultural piece, you know what? I'll tell you, when I was in Iraq, and I'm far enough away from that now, and my boss is out of the army, I wore pink rain boots to the shower. Was I allowed to wear pink rain boots? No, but that was Nicole. That's what I did. I had a pink towel. It was a little bit of me, so I took a little bit of risk there. Like, what's the worst that's gonna happen? They're gonna yell at me. I'm in Iraq. Okay, yell at me. But trust is like another.
Not the worst thing I'm gonna.
Right. I mean, I used to honestly. That's kind of like how I would weigh things for me. Like, what can they do to me that's worse than combat? Yeah, not a whole lot, like.
Missiles flying, people getting shot.
Right.
I take this pink towel.
I was
off.
there during the
Pull up about
surge,
these
like
pink boots.
07, 09. Trust me, yeah. So my pink boots were not the thing that were rocking the world at that time. And I think the other hard part for like young people, but young Black Americans, is like just even trusting that your best interest is going to be kept in mind when it comes to the army. And I'd have to say, like, for that, it depends. It depends on your boss. And I have had bosses who have thrown me under the bus, which is why I showed up to Chicago Broken. I had a boss that just really, really put a bunch of things on me that prevented me from being able to be as successful as I wanted to be. Luckily, I had another boss who had significant rank, who then was like, whoa, I see what's happening. And I was literally rescued, right? And so it can be that extreme where they had to pluck me out of that unit and move me and said, hey, you can't be in that unit. It is no longer safe for you physically and mentally and emotionally. But then there are other experiences where it's like, this is the only job, DOD, only job where me as a Black woman get paid the same as every other MFer out there in the Army, right? Like, I get paid the same thing they do. Whereas if I was doing another job in corporate world, I'd be making, what is it, like
70 cents to the dollar.
Yeah.
Wait, no, you're a Black woman, though, so it's less.
For women, but that's
Yeah,
less,
I mean,
yeah.
right?
that's
So I
what
think
the
about
Black woman,
60
so
cents or
like
something,
60
right?
Yeah.
So, like, there are things like that, and I have, education that the Army's paid for, and, race wasn't a factor, so I, was sent to get 2 master's degrees. So it's just a really hard thing, and I think young folks have to weigh, like, do I want to come in and shape something and maybe take a little bit of risk, and also know that you can actually be yourself in a lot of ways, to take advantage of what I call life starter kit, where you can get paid, you can get free school, right? Like, you can do all these things. So yeah, I know a lot of people that would probably sell crack before they join the Army too. I'm hoping that we can educate folks and show them that there are good chances. And also, look, if no one like me joins, then it's always going to be the same. It's never going to change, because I'm at 20 years, y'all. I don't know how many more I have left in me. Ma'am, I'm staying in forever, right? I don't know how many more years I have left in me. So, like, we need young folks to be able to, like, continue to carry on and change the Army from the inside.
Yeah, I mean, we work from the inside with prison yoga too,
Exactly.
right? We're conflicted about that all the time, I think, when we talk about Cook County, and it's like, it is progressive to have your yoga program there. Does that highlight Cook County as being progressive as a jail in general? Like, what does that do to say that, we are operating from within the system, and the system is allowing us to do it? So, like, good for you, like, rehabilitative programs.
Right.
Like, as though that's not just some very, very small piece of what is a very, like, unprogressive thing, but it is, I do think it's still,
pivotal.
I think, didn't you send me that the other day on Instagram, that if you pull the thread, you pull one thread,
Yeah.
like the tapestry of disarming, we could say, I guess, on point, but disarming this whole system that has been built over hundreds of years, right? But the tapestry is so thick and so interwoven. But I think you sent me something that said, like, if you pull at one thread, you do start to unravel the whole
Yeah.
thing. And you don't have to be, I have a lot of people ask me all the time about like activism work and like, I don't know how to get involved, and like there's so many different things, and if I'm about this one thing, shouldn't I be about this other thing? It's like, just pull at one.
Mhm.
Like, and that does
Mhm.
require, I think, working within the system that exists today, right?
Yeah.
Like so many organizations, I mean, even I think another anti-abolitionist organization that we were working like tandem to, not with, but next to, was telling me that they were getting paid by county and like by some of these
Oh.
for-profit organizations. So it's like that we know where the money exists now, and we kind of have to take it
Yeah.
to like
Yeah.
make it work and I don't know, adjust. It's not. I'm not being very articulate about it.
No,
right now,
I mean we
but-
recalibrate the system from the ground up if we got enough
gotta.
people on the inside and the
Yeah.
outside, and I think that's why I appreciate your stance
You gotta
and
both,
yours,
yeah, in and
because
out.
I am a rebellious motherfucker, and
Yeah.
I am so quick to press the button. I can tell I was a field nigga because I be fucking ready. I don't give what. Let's do it. Like, what we finna do? We finna go to court? What we finna do? We finna go to for the protest? What is it? And so like I be having to dial it back because as much as I want to, fight the good fight, I have to fight the right fights.
Yeah.
And I have to
Exactly.
know what are the important battles and which ones are the war.
Mhm.
If I fight every time somebody do me wrong, or every time I feel jaded, or every time somebody say something slick, I'll be exhausted.
Mhm.
I wouldn't even be able to make my hour-and-a-half journey to the north side to tell
To
jokes.
go, right?
I'm tired. But it's like, understanding that we're all needed in the grand scheme of things, right? Like this podcast wouldn't happen without people that are in the system and out of it, right?
Mhm.
No matter what side you feel like you're on. And so I think like even for like some of the people who I know from the more extreme side, that I just know from around the way, they feel a way about local government being over militarized. What do you think about something like that when you see like a small town police department with like a tank and you're like, oh, you got
Yeah.
sonic weapons.
Yeah.
I didn't even know they had audio weapons.
Man, I feel some kind of way about it too, and not to just keep coming back to Iraq, but that was a very impactful time in my life, and I was there for almost 2 years, and it is really like people say the saying like war is ugly. It is really bad, and watching folks go through harm, and not everybody in Iraq is bad. Not everybody who does the wrong thing or has a bad moment is bad, right? Like people are just trying to survive.
Say it again.
Right? Like right, and when basic human needs are not being met, sometimes we have to figure out how to survive. And I found that to be true in Iraq, even when someone was trying to blow me and my team up as we drove along Route Pluto, a route that I know very well, right? Like it wasn't meant that they actually wanted to kill me, though maybe that's what their behavior was saying, is that they were trying to get paid by the lead insurgents to be able to keep their family alive, right? So this over militarized police system, for me, I believe is unnecessary, and just it really ends up creating more violence than good, right? And so like every time we showed up with more and more kinetic, which is like tanks, aircraft with weapon systems, drones with weapon systems, every time we showed up more kinetic, our enemy, they're going to respond in the same way, right? They're going to progress, they're going to grow, they're going to try different techniques in order to continue to survive. Again, there are some
To fight back.
right, there are
Yeah.
some very like evil people, like a handful, and they hire and employ, kind of like if you think about how gangs run in the US, right? Like when a young person is brought into a gang, it's literally because they're looking for something. They're not looking to be a gang member. They're looking for something, and it's the same thing in combat zones. And so yeah, when they show up with like these tanks and like they call it their riot control gear, right? I'm like, look, I did riot control and I had a lot less than you did, and guess what? I'm fine. So I'm completely against it. I see some of the behaviors, I see the training, I read a lot about military techniques being taught in policing, and they're two different things. Our purposes are different. My job as a soldier, not when I'm in like the military police capacity in the United States, but my job as a soldier is to kill people so they don't kill us. to help sustain American democracy. Now we can debate that in another podcast.
Don't think
And
we
then-
won't have you back.
And then, but the police's job, their job is supposed to protect
the
and
citizens.
serve, right? Like, so how does that show protection? And yeah, it's just for me, like it's just a really like eye-opening thing, and I'm frustrated because we've got folks that get out of the military, go into these police forces, and teach them the things that we do, and it's not the same environment, right? And so that same tool cannot be applied everywhere, and that's what's happening right now, and I think it's unnecessary.
I wonder if that's because, I wonder if that is a product. I mean, I know that there's a systemic intention behind it, but I wonder if like the public sort of acceptance of that as a product of like refusing to sound like you're disrespecting the military, right? Like,
Yeah.
of course, if the military,
Yeah.
this is how the military runs, right? They should train the police because they are the first level of enforcement, and we will never disrespect like our soldiers. And I do feel that, right? Like y'all actually put your lives on the line, and we could talk about that on another podcast, but I wonder if that's an easy way for us to just be like, yeah, but who else should
but
do it?
that's
It's like a
like-
lot of other people should probably do it.
That's like that's a lazy way.
Yeah.
Right? Like if that's how people are viewing it, it's literally choosing to be lazy in thought and just be like, yeah, okay, and so for me, like that's even more frustrating because it's like, so you don't want to disrespect me, and so therefore you're going to militarize a completely different organization. Like, make it make sense here. Like, I don't understand that at all. And you're seeing the harm that it's doing in your own area. Like
Against
so,
other citizens,
right,
taxpaying
Yeah.
citizens.
right. And so that just again, I mean, like I'm processing this right now. I'm like, man, that just shows me how little you value me. Because if you truly valued me as your neighbor, then you would also want to do less harm. You would also want, like, because when people, like, get to know me, there's a lot of things that they're like, oh, man, I didn't actually realize that you could do this or that you could do that, right? Like, when there's assumptions when people see me as this, black woman, like, there's all those assumptions, right? And so, and then when they get to know me, they're like, oh, wow, yeah. So it's the same kind of thing, like, hey, get to know your neighbor, and then maybe you don't want that tank with police written on the side of it driving down. Because I've seen places where that's what happens, right? And those places are not succeeding in life, democracy, life, whatever, right?
Pursuit of happiness.
Yeah.
None of the
Right.
cool things we hear.
Right.
No.
It's exactly what you're saying, though. The correction to or the opposition to criminalization and militarization, I guess you could say,
Yeah.
is humanization.
Yeah,
right? It's
yeah.
you
And I
it's
didn't even
you
know
and
you guys were
me.
going to say that when I wore my human sweatshirt. I was just so like, I was like,
I
man,
know,
I want to
right?
feel so human today.
That's because we're on the same frequency. We're on the same
Right,
wavelength. We
right.
can talk without even opening our mouth.
We're running late as we always do, but as we always do. I want to ask you, at the very least, one thing. So, one thing that listeners could be interested in and know is that we are co-leads to the Division 11 class. The
Shout out
Division
to
11
our
men's
6 and
class
7
on
p.m.
Tuesdays. Shout out to the guys. Would love to hear, anything you have to say about that. If you got any fun stories. You and I talk about it a lot, and I think people don't get to hear about. People make a lot of assumptions about what's going on when we're teaching yoga in jail, and I would love someone else to set the record straight a little bit, or maybe just highlight.
I want to tell you two things. One
Okay.
you don't know, one you know.
Ooh.
The one you don't know is that I fill in for Catherine on jokes when she's not there.
No, you don't.
Oh, yes, I do.
Let's joke some
One thing
jokes.
you don't know is that one of our students provided one of our trainees or one of our other teachers a joke book to give to me
Nice.
after. And for a little context, y'all, on Tuesdays we have a off-the-record open mic in Cook County Jail.
Amazing.
After we do yoga, we do 2 Joke Tuesdays, in which we'll tell, or I guess either one of us will tell a joke if they tell us a joke back. And one of our students and guys and regulars gave Colleen a joke book to give to me.
That is so
which
awesome.
I believe he meant as good fun, and I took as the biggest insult.
As a professional comedian for
Well,
years, oh my God, why would you give me this?
His may have been like practice,
Joke.
but let me tell you,
Yeah.
they boo me. They are like, "When's Catherine coming back?" I'm like, "Wow,
I still
okay."
have to hear you do it.
so that's one. The other thing is, honestly, that is the most re-energizing time of my week. In
Sure, yeah.
Tuesday nights, especially in the winter, I'm tired and I'm, coming home from work, so I can go home, get my car, and like there's all these other things that I think that I want to do with my time. And then I walk in there and I get to be with a group of people who are interested, who are settled in themselves, which I think people believe that if someone's in the criminal system that they're like chaos, right, internally. No, these men are settled within themselves. And again, there are folks who have been in there for years and then their case gets dropped. Because
Which
there
is
wasn't.
illegal, to be clear.
Yes.
For folks to be sitting
Yeah.
in jail for years in Chicago. That
Right.
is illegal.
Years. And it's like, you know what, we actually didn't have any evidence, so it just took us some time to figure that out, right? And so, but they
This is
come
not
in.
uncommon.
Right, not at all. Not at all. But they come into class and they are eager, they are happy, and they have so much gratitude. The number of the guys that like just keep telling us like, thank you for being here, thank you for showing up, and like when we go on like snowy nights, even though they're not outside, they don't get to be outside, they're like, oh, was the road bad? Be safe, right?
Yeah.
And they're just they're so caring. And it's very authentic. Like, I'm not being played. I know there are people that are probably listening right now that think, oh man, they're just playing with this girl. No, they're not. Because the ones that are trying to play me, they don't come to class because they know who I am.
Yeah.
But
they know
right.
us.
But the rest of them that show up, like, I mean, every time I come home, I tell my partner how grateful I am for having gone again on Tuesday. And sometimes, no lie, sometimes it's a fight to get there.
Yes,
'Cause-
we go like rush hour on Tuesday evenings.
Yeah.
Traffic is awful. Ogden is awful. There's no
Oh,
way to the
Ogden
jail.
doing traffic?
Ogden,
Yeah. And look, like I said, I'm not from Chicago, so when I first said I was going to start teaching in there on Tuesday nights, I didn't know what that meant in terms of commuting. But yeah, I hope people can just remember, like we keep saying, like everyone in there is human. They all have their own story, and you don't know what they've been through or where they came to even get in there, right? So like I used to say this in the Army when I'd be in these meetings and I'd advocate for women in sexual assault situations or for minorities. I'd always say, like, if you need a face and you need like a human story to think about when you're making decisions or when you're passing judgment, use mine, right? Like assume that person that you're passing judgment on has my story, has my background, has my face, because then you're going to be able to like make them a human and be able to really make a better choice on how you want to interact and think about that individual. So everybody out there, like, you've heard my story, you've heard my conflict. Like, I could have made a different decision and been in the same situation as people in CCJ. So use my face, use my story.
Yeah, like how you were saying, you could have moved. You could
Right.
have sold instead of joining.
Yeah.
So, I think that's incredibly powerful. And to your point too, like a lot, once you are in jail, right? Whether you are convicted or not, like once you've been, there is zero closure
Yeah.
as you exit. So you are stamped, and whether it's economically, whether your family has moved on, whether your job has moved on, or whether you actually do time, whether you take a plea bargain just so you can get the fuck out, like your life is not the same after that, and we make sure of that, like systemically and legally we make sure of that. So that's something I'm always trying to like impress upon people too. I had someone after a show this weekend say legitimately to my face, I think it's crazy that you guys teach yoga in jail when I can't even get free yoga on YouTube. And I was
Oh
like,
my
first of all,
What the hell? Are you doing shows in some type of...
what kind of dumbass doesn't know you can get
Right?
free yoga
I
on
know.
YouTube? I have free yoga on YouTube.
So
like,
they don't know how to Google, which
Yeah.
like 2-year-olds do nowadays.
And then I legitimately asked him, I was like, okay, then let's like take the 3 steps back here that we need to, like, because you obviously are assuming criminals are not you. I was like, let's just, have you ever done anything illegal? Without even assuming that maybe he had been, and he was like, oh yeah, I did a night in the drunk tank, but like, when I went, obviously a white man, he was like, when I went, the officer like mishandled my situation, and the car, like they sat me on the curb, and then the car made maybe a foot of movement toward me, so I claimed self-defense on my, like, he obviously put this whole case together to get thrown out. And I was like, and he was like, oh yeah, but I was drunk in public and I did piss in public.
Right.
Like, had actually done the thing.
His grown pissy ass.
The audacity, the caucasity, truly.
Right.
I mean, I, shouldn't even be the person to use that word, but like the caucasity of you to suggest that like people also awaiting trial in jail. I mean, we could talk about prison too, but like that people don't deserve yoga.
Right.
But I was like, oh my God, like there's so many different layers to this, but that is at the very least, to your point, like putting a face to it, putting a visual to people, humanizing like people that have been through the system and have exposure to it is a little bit just what we're trying to do.
Right.
Because
I think the other part that I love so much about what we do, so we vibe so well when we teach together, and everything.
I know,
but
I'm so sad when
I know.
teach alone.
It's horrible. We both travel opposite schedules right now, but I think this week.
Yay.
But yeah, the other thing that we're doing though is like giving the students a human experience too, right? And giving them tools to be able to move around the system that's not made for them in a good way. And so it's like, okay, well, I'm going to teach you how to breathe in moments when you know somebody's walking up to you and they are intentionally going to do harm, even though maybe they're supposed to protect and serve, right? And they're going to intentionally do harm. So breathe through it, because I need you to survive differently, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why I love how we're giving them those tools and just really being able to like give them a human experience and like get to know who they are as individuals. So yeah, I really love Tuesdays.
I love Tuesdays too. And yes, I like, one of the things I say when we're talking to like, we're talking about grants and stuff and talking to people in more of an organizational level, or people like, I mean, that guy, I have a couple of words for him, but people that even may be a little more articulate about it but still not believe in fully what we're doing, or like people don't deserve it or don't understand the macroeconomic impact of doing rehabilitative work to people in jail, is like, to a degree still, what we're trying to teach and what we're trying to impart is like a degree of self-accountability and a degree of taking control of what you can control, right? Is only yourself. And one of the things that we've heard from a couple people on the podcast is like, no matter the program, no matter whatever, like career labeled criminals or whatever have done 15, 30 years in and out, was until they made that decision, like, wasn't anything going to change like for them. No program, no whatever. So like without taking any kind of frankly ego in it, because as my yoga teachers always said, right, like this information is out there, it's passing through me to you. Like I don't think there's any kind of shit that's like makes us particularly wise, but just providing the tools to say like,
we're the vehicle for it,
right? What you can do is all you can do.
Yeah, exactly, in every way, right? Like we're teaching them this through asana, through movement, because someone's like, hey, bend over and touch your toes, and everybody thinks they're supposed to be able to touch their toes. Actually, it's okay if you can only reach your shins or your knees today or whatever it is, right? Like we're teaching them like, hey, control the controllables, and what you can do with that's it. And so just understanding how to play with that a little bit, like how to know, like, not even your limits, but just know your reach in that moment. And your reach is not the same every moment, right? And it can look different. And you can one day stretch out a little bit further, and the other day, maybe something else is going on. Maybe you're carrying a little bit more that day. But then if you're carrying a little bit more and someone tries to antagonize you, breathe, right? Just breathe. Because remember, you weren't in that moment yesterday, or maybe even 5 minutes ago. And so you get to decide how you want to react in that moment and breathe. I mean, I love breathing. And I know, right? We all breathe, but no, I really love breathing.
I think that's big. I like this because I'm relearning. Like, I'm not a big yoga person per se. Like
you are now.
Well, I mean, I used to go to like twerk yoga.
Yeah.
Those are my favorites. But like, it was amazing.
One time we'll have one episode where you don't walk yourself into trouble.
Twerk yoga is amazing. I highly recommend it. But I think like it's cool that like some of the same ideas of like, whatever you do is what you do now. And like I remember, like, because naturally I went back, but I was able to do more the more I went. And it was like, I had this idea that then I lived up to because it was my idea. Like, I can't do this. I'm a man. I can barely reach. And it's like, yeah. So now I'm moving on that tangent. But as I went back, I was like, if I breathe, and then as I'm exhale, then I can reach a little bit more. So it's like, I do believe in like consistency over time, and I think that some of those lessons permeate through, you know, whether you go to trap yoga or twerk yoga like me, or you know, some of the more.
Honestly, any thread of it is great because it teaches you also that you're capable of change, like that your body is capable of change, that you are capable of making a different choice, and that again habitually like is. It's like micro and macro, right? As a society, I think we have a hard time believing that, and as a person sometimes, right? You get stuck in thought patterns and cycles, and like your brain is actually quite malleable, but you do have to force new thought patterns and new ways of like living and being and thinking into it, and you can do it, but it requires discipline. So like I think that any form of yoga and whatever provides discipline in your life, you know, different people do different stuff, but feeling that physically in your body is like an example, I think, that you can actually hold on to.
Love it.
Yeah. First of all, any final words, thoughts? We always like to ask guests what they're listening to. If you're doing anything fun, pod, music, anything.
You listening to that new Chief Keef? What you listening to?
Music wise, man. Look, I'm getting married in 116 days.
God, you remember down to the day like that?
I can tell you down to the minute if you let me pick up my phone, but we're not going to go there. So
yeah, she's got 14 spreadsheets. Yeah, I can't even imagine the folder of.
Look, I do. The spreadsheet is so good. I was admiring it last night. But all that to say, so what I'm listening to right now is a lot of father-daughter dance songs.
Aww.
I'm debating Beyonce. Or Daddy, right? Or Michael Bolton. And then this guy, Fred Black, who I wasn't super familiar with. So, again, please keep in mind, my dad's white, right? So, you know, I got to pick that good balance. Yeah, I know. I knew.
I was about to say, oh, white.
Yeah, so, but all of them, like, they all are just great. So that's actually what I'm listening to a lot of. And, of course, Beyonce, like, her newest songs. But I listen to a ton of podcasts. So, I mean, NPR has a really good podcast about the criminal system. And I spend most of my time listening to podcasts about other people's experiences, honestly, which I enjoy. I read a lot, too. But right now I'm reading for fun. Trash. So I'm not going to tell you the name.
Reading Zane books like you say the world, huh? I ain't mad at it.
You gotta have something to tune out, though. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's something different, but you gotta have something that takes your brain out of whether it's association or whatever. We all need what we need to turn on.
Yeah,
So.
I rotate through like those harder reads, right? Like where you're like really learning and hearing about true life challenges and like how to change the world and everything. And then I read whether it's like a young adult easy read, or my sister is an avid reader, so I usually just pick something off of her list and then go there. So yeah, bounce around.
Hell yeah. Well, Nicole, we are so happy that you were on the pod. We can talk to you for hours, and I think with every guest, like we'll have you back. We would love to hear more about everything, but thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you. Seriously,
everything.
This is
fun.
fun.
For being here. Again, this is the Beyond Bars podcast hosted at the Lincoln Lodge. This has been Nicole Miner, Kyrie Johnson, myself, Catherine Gongaware, and keep supporting Prison Yoga Chicago and keep listening, I guess. We'll wrap this part up better.
Stay classy,
next
Chicago.
time.
I'm just gonna steal Ron Burgundy stuff because he's not using it. Fucking grow my mustache out Ron Burgundy style. Stay classy.
It makes me